Hey, is the federal government coming for your gas stove? Find out today on Garden Fork Radio. Today I'm here with Rick and Nicole. Nicole's the adult in the room. We're going to be talking about gas stoves. And Nicole, you were real prescient on this because did we talk about this like a year ago or 6 months ago? And
Yeah,
I'm like,
according to the electric company or the electrician, it was like more than a year ago.
and I was like, I didn't really ever think about it. And now, obviously some of the media sources have blown this out of proportion, but how did this all start with you? How did you get this, all of a sudden the idea of the gas stove would be bad?
Well, there was that article, maybe it was like in The Guardian or somebody had done this big report about how it not only is pumping methane into your home bad for the environment, but it also has this, tandem issue of being bad for your actual health.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's
Yeah,
one of the ways the Europeans are trying to get people to switch over is like, hey, look, and the induction stoves apparently are just amazing. So why not switch? But
when you brought this up, the wheels started turning in my head because I'm like, we're all about carbon monoxide in, don't leave your car in the garage running. And then I'm like, well, what's the difference between that and the gas stove in my kitchen?
right. Well, and then I don't know if you guys watch any of the late night shows. I don't. But I did see Wanda Sykes was on one of them. And she apparently in the football games this week, the gas industry had like an ad for how great gas is. And it was very funny because like everything that was made out of petroleum products was just like disintegrating in the way Thanos killed everybody in the Marvel movies. Anyway, it was very funny. So obviously they're getting nervous about this, that people are actually switching.
I mean, long story short, the federal government's not going to break down your door and take your stove out. They're looking into what are the effects of this, which is kind of a little late. I'm thinking about it now, but Nicole? Have you taken your stove out?
No, so I just had the electrician come back, just randomly. Like I had him come back because they needed to do another quote and double check that I have enough. Because at first I wanted to do all three. I wanted to do the heat pump, the hot water heater, and the stove. And then given all of the like news about the stove, I was like, just do the stove first. You don't have to like do the entire house. Just do the stove, step one. Because in order to do all three of those, I'm going to need to do a heavy up. So we're going to have to get a bigger panel for the wall. So
okay, I was going to say, what's a heavy up?
Right. We're going to have to get a bigger, I guess we have 200.
You have 200 amps coming into your
200
house.
amps, and we'll need and the electrician was even saying that like, we're even telling people to do 400 because we don't know what's coming down the pipe. And then also the other attendant issue is that our infrastructure is not set up for this. So they're going to have to do stuff to the electric lines and, to strengthen them to carry more electricity.
Right, bigger cables.
Years ago, my sister-in-law worked for an organization when she was getting her master's. And one of the issues with the solar panels is that putting electricity the other direction back into the grid, they were not made to do that, the cables. And so they're sagging more, which I thought was really interesting.
From heat.
Yeah, they heat up more, basically.
Yeah.
So they expand and they sag. So, Rick, do you have an electric or gas stove?
We have a gas stove, but it's having problems, and I fixed it 3 times now. It's about 25 years old. So we are eyeing induction ourselves. And before all this started, we were talking about induction. When I went to there was a solar festival on the Mall of Washington, D.C., sometime in the 90s. And I went up there, and it was a competition, and all the universities, engineering departments had these small houses they had built using the latest solar principles. It was Solar Expo, I think they called it. And every one of them had an induction range, even in the 90s. It was a new thing then, very new thing. And I was impressed with it, and it's been in the back of my mind ever since. And so as this stove begins to die, and we have one burner that we can't turn on because it's somehow stuck. And when we tried to take out the two screws that hold the valve in place, they were corroded in place. And we said, if we break this thing, it's going to be a bad thing. And so, give me a match. Let's see if this is how it's working in here.
Does this leak?
Not, yeah. Give me a match. Is this leaking? So we're on the road to getting an induction stove when all this kerfuffle happened. And it is essentially just a political kerfuffle. We know that in the southwest or southeast of the United States, kids have the highest rates of asthma of anywhere in the United States. And it's because of we can talk about that later, but then having gas in the house actually makes children asthma worse. And so we're, and since I suffer from asthma, I said, well, maybe it's time for me to think about doing something different. And induction, I always like new things, and induction's the way to go.
I thought Nicole brought up a bunch of really good points because we're all like, yeah, let's go toward induction, but our houses and our infrastructure aren't wired for the amount of power that each home or each apartment is going to pull if we go to an induction cooktop, which is an electric cooktop, and then a heat pump, domestic hot water heater, and then heat pumps to heat our houses. So I thought what the electrician said to you was very prescient and what you had read about. So this is all good, but the powers that be have to help get our grid up to a level where we can handle all this stuff.
Well, and I think in the Inflation Reduction Act, they actually have a ton of money in there for that. And there's also, that's where the rebates are for a tax credit on getting you couldn't get a tax credit for a used electric vehicle, but now you can. And then you can also get like a heat pump for changing out your heat pump. And then I was just looking to see if there's one for your range. It looks like, according to Consumer Reports, yes.
So if you're curious about induction cooktops, I see them at IKEA a lot.
Oh,
and I'm sure, I guess if you go to a kitchen store, but there's a store here in Brooklyn called Build It Green, where contractors or homeowners that are renovating their home, and they have beautiful old doors, or I think this is absurd, but I think this happens everywhere, where people they buy a home and they got the kitchen, the appliances are almost brand new. And instead of throwing them out, they bring them to Build It Green. There might be other organizations like that in other towns, but invariably there's a couple of induction cooktops laying around there, and they're quite affordable at the Build It Green store. And they run on 240 or 220 or 208, depending on your power source, and it's probably a 50 amp
No, actually,
breaker.
I just looked at this. So the one that we want to get is 30 amps.
Oh, great.
Yeah, and then I guess the other one that was like slightly better was 35. So, yeah, in DC we
wow.
have a store that's called Community Forklift, and then I feel like Habitat for Humanity's store, those are nationwide now.
Yes. So you don't necessarily have to spend a small fortune to do this, but there is that question about the service panel, the electric service panel coming into your home, and the wires, the service wires that are in your neighborhood might need to be upgraded as more and more people add to it.
Well, but I think that's a far off problem for folks like us.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people have an electric clothes dryer, and that's 220 and draws really high amps. I don't know what they draw, but that's pretty high. And you only use a range or a cook stove for at most maybe 30 minutes a day, by and large.
Oh, that's
so
a great point.
yeah, it's not like you're using it continuously like an air conditioner or a hot water heater or something. So I think that almost anyone that has an electric stove, and I'm not sure how they compare a regular induction heating element or conduction heating element and an induction stove. I'm not sure how they compare on amperage draw because a lot of people have electric stoves already.
Right.
Right. Those pull more amps. That's why I was saying it's probably 50 amp because it's the same plug in your wall that a class 2 car charger will use, which is a big 50 amp. I think it's called a
Right.
14-50. I could be wrong about that. But I wanted to tell a little story that's related to this as far as the rebates that are out there through your utility or through your state or federal government. We got our house insulated and we got new windows put in and we got a car charger as well. And I applied for rebates for all three of these things through our electrical company called Eversource. And you should read the rebate fine print before you start your project because I ran into a couple of things where, like, I needed the number of the blower door technician. I needed his license number to finalize the rebate application for the new installation. And he did the blower door test, and then he either quit or was fired from the company he worked for, and he did not fill out his certification number on the form that he handed me. I don't know if he was thinking, well, I'll fill it out when we do the rebate with you or something. And I went with a different installation company. It's a long story. But I luckily emailed his company where he worked and explained the situation. I was honest about it. And they gave me his blower door certification number. And then with
I
the
was going to
windows...
say he probably got fired because he didn't have one.
I thought the same thing.
No, he was a good guy. There was some other weirdness, and I just had a bad feeling about that. It ended up that the company was very helpful to me in the end, in the long run. And I would probably go differently the next time. And then the windows, you got a $50 per window rebate. And I'm like, okay, well, that's not a ton of money considering what a window costs, but I'll apply for it. And in the fine print, it said, we need to process this, you need the NFRC label off the shrink wrap packaging of every new window you installed, which is this Energy Star rating thing.
That yellow tag.
Essentially, it's not yellow on the windows, it's white, but it's the same thing. And my contractor had stripped all the plastic off and put it in the trash a month ago. So what did Eric do? Well, I went to my trash can and I dumped it upside down in the garage. And I actually found two of them that had been thrown out later. But I had 17 windows replaced, you know? So I wrote a letter and I emailed the supplier of the windows, great guy Keith at Miners in Connecticut. And I said, this is my dilemma. He goes, well, I can print out the Energy Star ratings of all the windows and their dimensions for you. And he did that for me. And I included that with the two stickers I found. And I said, look, I didn't know we needed these until afterward. And my contractor threw out all the stickers. So we'll see what happens. But, people go into this, whether it's solar or whatever, thinking, oh, I get the rebate. Read those rebate pieces of paper before you start because you might need some very important little stickers.
Well, also, it seems like your guy could just get some stickers from the next job.
You're
I
in
don't know.
Chicago, right? Yeah.
I don't know. Okay.
Anyway,
well,
Nice store you got here. It'd be a shame if anything happened to it.
you go in there with your little razor.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I'd be curious to hear from our listeners, which it's radio@gardenfork.tv, if anyone has an induction cooktop, because you can have an electric stove that has the coils that heat up and get red and orange, and you might burn yourself. An induction cooktop is a glass surface, and it uses a magnetic technology to heat up your pots. So,
And it doesn't get hot. The cooktop itself doesn't get hot, right? So
right. Yeah.
But
Okay,
you
well,
know
just
go ahead, Nicole.
all right. Well, just quickly, I just want to say that if you're doing this, I now know the three steps. You need the electrician, you need to have the plumber, and you need to get the appliance. So the plumber has to cap off your gas line.
Yes.
So I, being the, non home renovator of the group, didn't quite understand that I needed all three items. And you need to do, you have to have it sequential.
Hey, real quick, one easy way to support Garden Fork is if you're going to shop online and use Amazon, please use the link to our storefront. The link is in the show notes here. If you click on that, it'll open it up in your web browser. If you're on a laptop or desktop, it will open it up into your app, ideally if you're using the Amazon mobile app. Please shop locally. I go to my local hardware store first. If I can't find it there, then I go to the orange or blue store. If I can't find it there, then I order it online. So if you are shopping online, use our Amazon link, amazon.com/shop/gardenfork. The link is also in the show notes. Thank you.
Let's talk about briefly some of the downsides of an induction. I did not know we were going to talk about this today, but I
Surprise.
was doing some research. I didn't know we were going to talk today at all. I was doing some research last night, and I was watching YouTube videos, and a cook that I've been following a long time. I really like her presentations and whatnot. Is named Helen Rennie, Rennie. I sent you a link. And she had tried several of the, probably was given loaners. She does cooking classes, and so people want to advertise their goods. And she tried several of the induction stoves, and she had some recommendations, but mostly she was telling you what to look out for. And one of the things is the size. Size matters. You gotta look for the size of the, I want to say burner, but the induction unit
Surface.
on top, surface, because if your pan overhangs on the edges, it's going to be dead cold when you put it on there. It heats the material inside your pan, your food. It does not necessarily heat the pan itself. Yeah, she was having trouble with pan warping, and you put a large pan on a small burner, for a better term, and it heats up in the center, and it's cold on the edges, and it warps the pan a little bit. And particularly at very high temperatures, because she can boil water in 2 minutes with an induction stove. I think that's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And so the thing you have to do is never run a pan empty and then put stuff in it. Have oil or butter or water or something in the pan when you turn the induction on, so it begins to heat more evenly through the material that you're cooking. But also start off at a lower temperature, even though you're going to sear, and she thinks they sear beautifully. But start at a lower, a medium, and warm things up slowly so that your pan does not take on a permanent warp.
Wow.
I mean, you do have to have the right pans, right? I think that's like no copper pans.
Yeah, you
Right,
have
you have to have pans that are magnetic.
Right. And Eric's favorite cast iron is remarkable on an induction stove, and almost all the pans now have some amount of regular steel inside that will interact with the induction magnet and heat. But even some of her pans that were marked as induction safe or for induction, and if it's on the bottom of the pans now, how you wash them, what they're good for, what kind of induction or electric or gas, that type of thing. It's all on the bottom of the pan. And some that said induction failed miserably on her induction test when she was actually using them. And so
Well, that goes back to your Consumer Reports there, Rick. is to check,
Oh,
use your library subscription to Consumer Reports and check your pans.
that's right. Take a magnet and stick them to the bottom of every pan, or if you're going shopping for new pans, take a magnet and stick them to the bottom, and check and make sure that there's some mag. It will stick there. Pardon me,
That
at
it'll
least
work.
a little bit. Yeah,
I always
'Cause you-
carry
you
a
get-
magnet. Don't you guys?
well, and a tape measure.
That's part of the Garden Fork daily carry, tape measure, magnet.
Magnet.
It's our
Ball
part
of
of our
twine.
everyday carry kits. Some people have guns and knives and stuff in their everyday carry. We have magnets and tape measures and a magnifying glass.
Some
And
vice
just
grips.
a little, what are those things called to cut things? So we can cut out things that we need.
A box
Box
cutter.
cutter.
Yeah, and also dog treats. We all carry dog treats.
My dogs, all they want from me is dog treats now. It's like I have a little dog treat bag when we're out running. We go in the park and they run around. And then just every 5 minutes, they just come back because they just want more food. It's not to say hello. They're just like, hey, can I have a
Well,
snack?
They're
you saying it's
Labradors.
It's almost Pavlovian.
I don't know, but it keeps them nearby. It certainly does work, And the camera operator carries biscuits in all her clothing. So now Andy, she's a real talker. And whenever she wants anything, she'll tell you. And so she's over by the coat rack and she starts going, and she just whines away. And you come over and you're like, what's going on? And you finally realize that she knows that there are dog treats in a particular jacket. And she just
gosh.
wants the treats out of the jacket.
She's really trained you.
I am highly trainable. So
We'll have to ask the camera operator about that.
yeah, I am.
Yeah.
No, we're not bringing her into this.
And you have your wife's permission to say so. Yeah.
My
well,
sister
what
will be
else
on the
is-
show soon. So
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, she knows who knows you best.
yeah,
Is this when we pivot to electric cars?
yes.
Are we doing electric cars again? Again?
No, I'm just kidding. I was kidding.
Well, here's the thing. No, but here's the thing that I was thinking about. We were talking about the induction cooktops and the video link that you sent me. The thumbnail is do this before you get induction cooktop, kind of like raising eyebrows about, oh, maybe there's something wrong with induction cooktop. Is I'm so tired of people telling me that my electric car is going to catch on fire because almost every time I drive down the interstate, and I drive 300 miles a weekend, there is a gasoline car on the side of the road that caught on fire and is sitting there all burnt out. So stop telling me that my electric car is going to catch on fire, because the problem is there's so few. It's kind of like airplane crashes versus automobile crashes. There are automobile crashes every 30 seconds or something. And yet there are very few jet crashes, but they're more spectacular. And I guess the electric car fire is more spectacular than a gasoline car fire. I don't know, but I'm just, as soon as a new technology comes along, like the induction cooktop or like the electric car, everyone wants to point out to me the failings of that new technology rather than how this might save the world,
Well, there's a economic term for it. It's a type of bias. I can't remember.
Wow.
Well, you're no
See?
help at all.
No, Nicole's the smartest person in the room, Rick. I don't know if you realize that.
Well, yeah,
What's it
but
called? If I can't remember the term, what good am I? Yeah, I hear you.
The camera operator is the same way. I was talking to her about my frustration of making YouTube thumbnails and how Garden Fork isn't exactly a DIY show. I call it, it's a video blog masquerading as a DIY show, because a lot of DIY show thumbnails will show like a before and after, and I'm like, but there isn't always an after. It's just kind of, I'm trying to show you what I do. And the camera operator had this amazing phrase that reflects her knowledge and her work. And I'm like, oh, you said that so much better than I did. So she said it so well that I wrote it down in my notes thing.
And
So
what
I'm
does it
gonna
say?
Find it.
Yeah.
Experience is harder to capture than outcome.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So how to show experience in a thumbnail versus an outcome in a thumbnail was
Yeah.
my dilemma. And
I was a
I was
little
like, wow.
disappointed, yeah, in this. Now I love Helen Rennie's videos, but I was disappointed. Watch before you buy one, and she's got this somewhat shocked or disappointed look or something on her face.
Yes.
And it turns out she's thrilled with her induction ranges, and but you have to do that kind of thing. I mean, if it bleeds, it leads, as
Right.
they say
Basic.
Yeah, they take advantage. Nobody wants to hear happy talk, particularly.
I texted Brent. He thinks it's the availability bias, but that's not the one I was thinking of. You hear about every plane crash, but not every auto crash, right? So.
Right.
Right.
But maybe this pivots us into whether or not America's on track.
Correct. So there's an article by David Brooks in The Atlantic, and I don't read The Atlantic a lot because it's kind of depressing, but this was something that came across one of my suggested reads, and I sent it to Nicole, and I was like, wow, do you want to talk about this? And she said yes, and then I think I forgot to send it to you, Rick.
Well, I have it right here.
No,
Oh,
I think
okay.
Rick read it first and sent it to you, and you sent it to me.
Oh, okay. But that's kind of like the car crash versus the plane crash thing, I think, in a way.
Yeah.
But Nicole, could you summarize it?
Right. The whole point I would like to first say that if David Brooks has to publish something in the Atlantic Monthly instead of at the New York Times, that says something. I'm not sure what it says, but it says something. And because he's an opinion writer for the New York Times. And so anyway, he's just saying that, like, we have this bias. We think everything's going to, we think everything's going poorly. And actually, if you make a pro con list or a good thing, bad thing list, you can see that no, like, things are getting better, everything is progressing. Now, for me, it's more about the serenity prayer. Like, there are a lot of things on his list that are things that are getting worse that I can't control. And I think the most important thing is to remember to do the things you can control. And honestly, you just can't worry about the rest.
Yeah, you can control your micro world, and
I can get rid of my gas stove, right? I can get rid of my gas stove. I can buy an electric
and talk
car.
about it on the podcast.
Right. So he does talk a little bit about Tyler Cowen in this article, and I am a big fan of Tyler Cowen. He's a professor at GW, and his reviews. He has had this long-running review of local ethnic restaurants in D.C., in the DMV, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia area, and he does these in-depth reviews, and they're so good. And he was also on my friend, he would write for my friend, well, I call him a friend, but he was an internet friend, Seth Roberts, who was a well-known professor who was really into doing personal self-experimentation, where he would, like, try waking up every morning and looking at faces and seeing how that made him feel over a long period. So he was doing experiments with one participant rather than doing with many participants and trying to improve his life. Unfortunately, Seth died. But Tyler had written about getting rid of his gum disease using flaxseed oil pulling, where you swish flaxseed oil around in your mouth. And that's fascinating to me.
Wow. I floss incessantly and use a fluoride-based mouthwash, and that's how I fight the gingivitis. So,
Well, you might try the flaxseed.
yeah.
One of the things I liked most about this, people have a negativity bias. There is, evolutionarily, there is no benefit to being happy all the time. They'll get you eaten by lions. And so people, the negativity bias, of hearing about a tiger in the bush somewhere nearby keeps you alive, even these stories about it. But David, what's his name here?
Brooks, David Brooks.
David Brooks.
Brooks, yeah, has this great line in here. there he was doing a review of literature and statistics, and in other words, there was a 68% point gap between the reality people directly experienced in their daily lives, how they felt about things, how things went, what kind of day they had, and the reality they perceived through the media filter. And I think that's, we're just, that's the reason that some of these news stations and whatnot, every bad thing that happens gets amplified, is because we want to know about it and we learn about it. And we think the entire world's that way, but we can't somehow apply that to our daily lives. Essentially, I think I've talked about this before, but in your brain you have the amygdala. And the poor little amygdala, its job is to essentially run the fight, flight, or freeze part of your limbic system, and it can't determine. It's a part of your reptilian brain. It cannot determine whether a story about a tiger eating a child was in your neighborhood or it was in a neighborhood in India. And it reacts the same way. And so with all this negative information flowing into our brains constantly, our poor little amygdala is just worn out, because it really, it's a simple little device. It thinks that in its own way that it's acting right, but it is poorly evolved for the world we live in with modern communications, all the different ways we have of influencing each other.
And my solution is just not to read the news anymore.
Yeah.
My solution is 5 minutes a day. If you listen to NPR news, top of the hour news, once, maybe twice a day, you know everything there is to know about.
Yeah, I would say
Yeah.
I'm just very selective, right?
Yeah.
I have become more selective in what things I allow to get inside of my brain.
Wow, that was a lot. I just thought we'd talk about gas stoves, and look where we went.
Yeah. Okay, well, how much time we've been on this a while.
I know.
Yes. We have to do the after show. So
I have a follow-up on my toilet toils. You remember the toilet that broke and
Yeah, we remember the toilet.
And all that?
Did you have safety goggles on?
No, I didn't have any of that stuff. That's the reason.
all right, we're going to talk about this in the after show, okay?
I think that would be a good after show, but I just wanted to follow up on actually the most important part of that story. So we'll do that in the after show.
Okay, everyone. So if you have some thoughts on gas stoves, or if you have an induction cooktop, I would love to hear from you. It's radio@gardenfork.tv. Nicole and Rick and I are going to stick around for the after show. If you're interested in becoming a supporter of the show, you can become a patron. You get the after show. You get photos that I send to people, links to YouTube videos I like, just Eric's world, just about almost every day. So that's information is in the show notes there. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week. Garden Fork Radio is produced by Garden Fork Media LLC in Brooklyn, New York. Our producer is Sean O'Neill. If you need an amazing podcast producer, visit Sean's site, SeanInBrooklyn.com. That's Sean, SEAN, in Brooklyn.com. Our executive producer is Jimmy Goose. For more information about Jimmy and the custom hollow books he makes, visit hollowbooks.com. The music in the show is licensed from audioblocks.com and uniquetracks.com.